Welcome to Midlife Reclaimed, the podcast for women ready to navigate midlife with more clarity, compassion, and energy. I'm Shannon Swales, psychologist, writer, doggy mama, and midlife woman walking this path alongside you. Twice a month, we explore real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you move through chronic stress, overwhelm, and burnout so you can reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your joy. Please remember what you hear here is general information, not a substitute for personal therapy. This isn't about midlife crisis, it's about midlife reclamation. So let's begin. Hi, welcome back or welcome to Midlife Reclaimed podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm Shannon Swales, the host, and today is another solo episode where I share my expertise, wisdom, a blend of my knowledge that I've gained through psychology and the practice of it, but also lived experience as well, my own and others. Anyway, today we're focusing in on caregiver burnout. This is something that I see time and time again in my practice. And when I'm speaking to caregiver burnout, I take maybe a bit of a broad lens. Anyone that is in the role of caregiving, which quite frankly is pretty much every midlife woman I know, whether that's in the parental role, the taking care of elderly parents role, volunteer caregiving role, whether it's in their professional roles like psychologists like myself, caregiving. If you are someone who provides a lot of care out professionally or personally, as a friend, to people who are very vulnerable, or just the people you love and care for. If you identify with caregiver and you feel like you've experienced a lot of chronic stress, a lot of emotional and mental load from it, then caregiver burnout might be something going on for you. So stay and tune in. So that's what I mean by caregiver burnout. What I tend to find particularly in the midlife women space, is that a lot of the women I work with, and this might be you, is that we give and give and give out to others. It's flowing out, that care, the noticing and tending to suffering of others, friends, family, clients, professionally, it's all flowing out. And what I notice when I even test the waters and share about how that caregiving is you turning and coming back to them, they're like stunned in terms of, well, it doesn't really, the kind of deep, compassionate care that they have for others, their children, their clients, whoever, doesn't flow back in the same way to them. And this is for many reasons, and we'll talk about that in this episode today. But this is why I'm sharing it today, because what we do notice is that flow, I often call it the flow of compassion, that caregiving with those of us who are caregivers, it's natural and a desire and a value for us to have that flow outwards. But in order to have a sustainable life as a caregiver, there needs to be some sort of flow back in. So that's what today is all about. So if that resonates with you, stay tuned, stay with me, and grab your cup of tea if you haven't already, coffee, whatever your jam is. Sit back, or if you're on the treadmill or bike or whatever, take a tuning in and see what this episode brings with you. Thank you for being here. So why do caregivers burn out, particularly in midlife? Well, it all starts, as often it does, back in our early life, where our early life experiences have shaped us in some way to value or need to be in that role as caregiver. And there's many things that could be influencing that. It could be that you learnt that it was more safer to be in the role of giving out care than actually to receive it. Or maybe it was habitual because you had caregivers that required, for whatever reason, a lot of care to them. So just from a young age, that's how you learnt to operate in relationships, close relationships. It might be, so that's sort of an extension of family roles as well, like your role in that family that you were raised in. It could also be cultural or gender expectations as well. A lot of women of my age group, Gen Xers, and I believe millennials as well, and definitely boomers, that there was definitely this cultural expectation, and still is, that the woman is the one to provide the care, not only for their children, but everyone around them. And that our identity and sense of purpose and value in the world is measured against that. So no wonder we become the caregivers everywhere in our life. And we also learn some, bullshit rules, as I call them, around, taking care of yourself and how that is seen culturally, particularly for women. And that can be seen as like almost like something that you do after everything else is done, or sometimes selfish, and that it's not okay. So you're probably getting the picture, back in our early life. And I encourage you to sort of check in on that, is where did this focusing caregiving outwards come from for you, and that flow inwards be not even considered? Yeah, check that out. So then, of course, midlife arrives for all of us. And this is often like the perfect storm period, really, because often this is where our responsibilities are the highest in terms of our caregiving roles. So whether that be professionally or personally at the home. I know for me, it was professionally, not so much in my home life, although I did take the caregiver role on in all of my personal relationships. So, no, at home as well, but not traditionally as a mother. I'm a mother to furry children, dogs, but not to humans. Uh, but like, it's just this kaleidoscope of loads that we're carrying in midlife. And we've been carrying that load for some time. And that kind of way of being, of always focusing outwards and hardly, if anything, focusing inwards, that we're spent. And of course, with the shifts and changes happening hormonally as well with perimenopause, that is making carrying that load a lot harder to do. I won't go into why that is, because there's other episodes that go into that. But yeah, so midlife is definitely a vulnerable time for burnout to occur, and particularly for those of us who focus outward on caregiving and don't have that U-turn, that flow back inwards to help resource us. And, in this stage of life, in midlife, where our resources and resilience is down, our demands are higher, that often what we do, and have been taught to do, is to basically turn on ourselves, that I'm not coping well enough. I need to do better. Everybody else can, but I can't. So there's a blame and an anger, and even shaming and guilt that turns on ourselves. And that, not necessarily for everybody, but for some of us, there can be that quite self-judgment, and judgment that comes from the outside too, culturally. We're not born judging ourselves, it comes from somewhere. But if we have that kind of relationship with ourselves, instead of caring for ourselves, instead of having that same level and depth of compassion and care and love that we have for others that we care for, when it comes to us, it's often mean and judgmental, or surface level, like bubble baths, and nothing wrong with a bubble bath, but it's not done with that level of care and want and desire and love. So it doesn't hit the surface, and we sink, we burn out. Yeah. So I want to take a moment here to be clear, and what I mean when I talk about the U-turn and that caregiving, and I've used the word compassion comes in, the term I'm going to use to just capsulate all that is self-compassion. Obviously, that caregiving that goes out is compassion for others, but when it comes into self to self, self-compassion. And often there's a lot of misconceptions about what self-compassion is. And one of the big ones is that it's this sort of airy-fairy kindness, like being soft on ourselves, let ourselves get away with things, weak. Yeah, lots of negative connotations. And I just want to share what I mean by self-compassion. And I adopt a couple of definitions, but the one I want to share with you that I think is really important, and I share with my clients and inside the midlife community, women over 40, and that is that compassion is about the noticing of suffering in self and others, and then taking action to alleviate or support that suffering. So it's quite active, as you can hear, and it's also noticing and aware. And as human beings, we all suffer varying levels, varying degrees. We can get into the comparison debate, but one thing we all have in common is that we will suffer. We will experience pain in our lifetime. And then when we experience that pain and suffering, that it is important to take action to either alleviate it where we can, or supportive action to soothe us during that time. Now, take a moment to think about and reflect that outward caregiving, so that compassion, and it's not about perfect, can I just say too, no one's the ultimate compassionate being, we're not on it all the time. So it's not about judging how compassionate, how good of a caregiver we are, but just generally, when you're focusing on caregiving of your loved ones or at work or whatever it might be, that there's this general just reflecting on, am I noticing their suffering? Might be that they're behind in their work. If you're a leader, a manager, might be noticing that they're turning up late a lot, and then taking action. It might be checking in on them and going, hey, I've noticed you're getting behind in your work, or noticing that you're showing up late all the time, and I'm just concerned about you. Is there anything I can do? So basically, what I'm wanting you to do is just reflecting on that caregiving outwards, and if it meets that compassionate kind of, noticing and taking action towards the suffering that you notice, no matter how big, small. And then I want you to think about how you do that for yourself. Do you notice your suffering, your pain? And do you take actions to alleviate or support it in the same way or in the similar kind of intention? And whatever shows up, whatever the answer is, that's okay. It's just taking stock of where you're at right now. What I want to share, though, is just going deeper into what we mean by compassion. So when you're reflecting on, and we're reflecting more on the compassion in, because as I mentioned, this episode's not about the caregiving out. We're really good at that. We're burnt out by that because it's always focused on the other, and we need it focused on ourselves too to be balanced, sustained human beings. We all need to be cared for. When we're talking about compassion as well, and let's focus on the self, it has particular qualities, particular attributes. It's the quality of noticing distress. So we need to actually be self-aware enough to notice the suffering turning up in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, our feelings, and be able to pause long enough to notice that, to not judge, which often we do, instead being curious, and also being able to sit with that distress. A lot of us miss being really caregiving towards ourselves because again, going back into childhood, we can develop a lot of bad relationships with our own distress due to early life experiences. But true compassion for ourselves and for others is our ability to sit with that distress. We need to be able to sit with it, to understand it, to be able to meet it with care. So, distress tolerance is really important. Empathy is important, even for ourselves, to actually seek that understanding that it makes sense that I feel this way, like stepping into our own shoes and going, oh, yeah, I can see why you're angry. I can see why you're upset. I'm here for you, that sympathy, that yeah, empathy. And then the other attribute is taking actions of care, to actually do that support action, whatever that might be. Maybe with anger, it might be to notice what boundary has been crossed or what need might have gone unmet, and doing our best to address that. Or it might be feeling sad and needing to take some time to just soothe, to maybe make a cup of tea or something. It might not be able to solve a problem, or solve the fact that you're sad, but more just be with yourself and doing something to soothe. Anyway, so there's many attributes to compassion, and you might be getting a sense of that depth now that I'm talking about. So not that bubble bath, whilst that's great, we're getting that depth, the real care and love for ourselves. If we truly love ourselves, that we meet ourselves in this way. And I will also want to share that compassion is also quite wise. Like we use our wisdom, we use our learnt experience, and we also use the fact that we don't know everything. So open-mindedness. So compassion is also about using our wisdom and learning. It also is a lot to do with strength and courage, because sitting with our distress, I mean, geez, and other people's distress, that takes a lot of courage, that takes a lot of strength. And to take actions of care often take a lot of courage and strength as well, because of those learned early experience that, that we haven't done it before, and it might feel awkward or wrong or even fearful. So I just wanted to highlight that. So self-compassion is not weak. It's not airy-fairy and just being kind to everyone and ourselves. No, not at all. It, as hopefully I've demonstrated, quite deep and quite a meaningful relationship when we are able to engage with it ourselves and be that caregiver we have been for everybody else. I'm just going to pause here for a moment to share something with you. If you've been listening and thinking, I wish I had a space where I could talk about this with people who truly get it, that's exactly why I created the Midlife Reclaimed community. It's a gentle, real, and supportive space for women navigating midlife. Whether you're facing chronic stress, overwhelm, burnout, or simply wanting to reconnect with yourself. We meet for live, weekly support circles, share reflective prompts, and learn together so you can feel seen, heard, and supported as you reclaim what matters most. You don't have to figure it all out alone. Visit shannonaswales.com/midlife-reclaimed-community to join us. Now let's get back to the episode. So the beautiful thing here is that we already have a caregiving system. We already know how to be caregivers. It's been directed outward. You've been noticing the suffering of others and taking actions to support it. Those attributes I mentioned, strength, courage, wisdom, distress tolerance, non-judgment, all those qualities, attributes you've been demonstrating. That's your caregiving system. It already exists. So you already know the how, which I think is just, amazing. You don't need to learn anything new, but the challenge is the U-turn. And there's a lot that comes with that. But you don't need the how, turn to your caregiving system that goes outwards to document. And when I say document, you can write it down. What are those things I do? So you already have the system. It's redirecting it in. Now, I've mentioned already, caregiving, when we U-turn it back into ourselves, can bring up a lot of discomfort. It can just essentially bring up discomfort because it's something new. Our minds are great detectors of discomfort. And anything new, it can just be a little bit alarmy. And so you can get this feeling in the body that when you start practicing compassion towards the self, that it just feels wrong, but actually it's just new. So a lot of comments I get from clients of people I work with, they'll be like, it feels weird, and, but also of value, but it feels weird. So just to know that can come up, but also, it can, another common one that people, they just feel more vulnerable. They feel more unsafe, that their defenses are down, that they feel less protected because that caregiving role, that caregiving outwards and not focusing inwards has been some way maybe protecting them from the difficult feelings and thoughts and unmet needs and uh, everything that's there that hasn't been tended to, that needs caregiving. Yeah, it can feel really vulnerable, and we can feel not necessarily believe we're weak, but just feel like, okay, we're more of a target as a result of being compassionate, that we're somehow going to be used or taken advantage of. Yeah, lots of things, and even just believe that there might be a belief that if that I'm being compassionate, I'm more selfish or maybe weak. Again, a lot of this comes from what we spoke about earlier, those early life experiences, but being able to notice those challenges that come up when you start to U-turn and bring it to yourself, being aware of them is important so they don't blindside you, and to normalize and validate these experiences. They've come from your early life, so it's okay. I mean, it's not fun, okay, to feel unsafe, to feel vulnerable, but that it doesn't mean that this is wrong to bring that caregiving, that compassion into self. It just means that the body hasn't learned, the mind and the body hasn't learned yet that it is safe. But with you taking action and practicing over time, it will learn that it's safe to do so. But it's got to do before it feels, if that makes sense, which is the hard part. But the beautiful thing about compassionate actions, that caregiving system you have that's already inbuilt in there that goes outward, that same system that you're going to be practicing, but on you, is going to help you in that transitional period too. When we meet those fears, those anxieties, those beliefs that I'm being selfish or this is weak, when we meet that with that caregiving, that compassion, like we notice the suffering because that is suffering, and we take actions to support it, not stop doing the compassion, but what will help soothe and support me as I take these actions of care towards myself because I feel that this has value and has purpose and meaning for me. I want to be doing this. So it might be, an action of just taking some small steps into caregiving turned inwards. It might, that self-compassion might be practices just small and minor to start with and build as you get used to it. So yeah, so the actual caregiving system, the compassion that you or actions you already have going outwards that you're focusing on inside can help you with the transition. And there was, and I'm probably not going to do justice to this, but in Dr. Stan Steindel's book, The Gifts of Compassion, which I interviewed him a while back on the podcast. So check out his episode where we go into talking about his book, but into compassion and how that helps us with burnout. He talks about he talks about these fears, blocks, and barriers to bringing compassion in. And he uses the metaphor of, when we buy a new pair of shoes, that when let's think about the shoes as trying on self-compassion. And to start with, it might feel a little bit weird, that weird. It might even be a little bit awkward, might even be a little bit tough. But over time, those pair of shoes start to feel comfortable and right as we walk in them more and more. And that's what self-compassion, bringing compassion in for the caregiver, can feel like. So as you're practicing, just imagine it's a new pair of shoes. Now, it's probably obvious already why self-compassion is important in midlife, but let's just talk about that a little bit more. Midlife, often, whilst I think it's a beautiful time in life, honestly, it's also a very challenging time in a woman's life. Also for men, but I focus on women. So it's a challenging time. So there's a lot of suffering, lots of things that are coming up. You know, our bodies are changing. We're experiencing perimenopausal symptoms, or some of us are, or a lot of us will. We're experiencing different health changes. Lots of health conditions can come up at this time. Our aging body, things are slowing down. There's there's lots of things, our relationships and challenges there with our children as well. There's just our work. There's a lot of difficulties that can arise. So there's even more need to have a relationship with ourselves that is able to meet these difficulties in a way that helps support us. And as I mentioned earlier, we're often facing a lot more difficulties. So, the beautiful thing about self-compassion is the research has shown such significant results in terms of how it can help with lowering things such as perfectionism, which creates a lot more stress and anxiety and challenges during difficult times because we hold ourselves to these really high, rigid expectations and standards, and our worth is based on meeting them. So it helps lower perfectionism. It also helps deal with that inner self-critic, the one that when it notices that we're having difficulties, that maybe we're falling short of where we think we should be. And instead of encouraging and supporting ourselves and understanding, we beat ourselves up. So self-compassion is found to really support reducing the self-critical voice and building instead a very compassionate inner voice. It also helps lower anxiety and depression and helps with chronic stress and burnout as well. It helps increase our ability to regulate emotionally as well, which can be a lifesaver, particularly in our relationships as well. It also helps with greater life satisfaction. I often hear women, and I was one of them, where my satisfaction with life, or even my connection with life, was just very, very poor. So self-compassion can be really useful for this and build a greater sense of safety and a sense of self inside, which is so important as we navigate the ups and downs of our world and midlife. But beyond this research evidence, the most important thing to sit with is the voice that is inside of ourselves. How we speak to ourselves is what I mean here, matters. And the compassionate voice over the critical or judgmental or neglectful or abandoning voice. The compassionate voice is something that will help us weather the natural and normal ups and downs of our life, and particularly midlife. One of the things that I share with those that I work with is something that I got from compassion focused therapy, Paul Gilbert's, one of his books, and he shares about two teachers. And he gets you to imagine that you have a child, your child, and you're putting them through learning to play the guitar, let's imagine, or whatever you want, that they're learning. And you're imagining that there's two types of teachers that they could have. Now, one teacher that they can have teaches them guitar, in my case, in a way where they might say, geez, you're getting it wrong. Are you practicing? Have you practiced enough? If you practice, you wouldn't be getting it wrong all the time. I just wish you would practice. You're doing it wrong. That's not good enough. Now, imagine another teacher. Same thing, learning the guitar, helping them be able to play a tune. And they're there with them, that your child is playing, and they go, "Hey, you're doing a really good job there. I'm noticing you're struggling on one of those notes. Can you play that again for me? And I'll just see what's going on there." Or, "Hey, what's happening for you? Can I help in some ways?" Uh, and you might have noticed there's a different pitch and pace and tone between the two. But now I ask you, which teacher, if you could choose, would you choose for your child? And most of my clients are like, "Well, that's no brainer, Shannon. Of course I pick the nicer one, the one who's softer, kinder, and more helpful, and wanting to help them and encouraging." But then I ask, which teacher resides in you? And most of the time they're like, "Aha, the first one, the harsher, the meaner." Maybe not as mean as the one that I said, maybe a little bit different, but usually it's some sort of version of that. And that's interesting, isn't it? Again, when we're caregiving out, we want that best. We want that compassionate other. We want someone who is able to sit in that distress that child might be having, or that we're having, that will support us to be able to get to the goals that we want to do, but in a way that's empowering, not putting down, not making us feel bad. That sustainable wise, we're more likely to keep the guitar up and keep playing and enjoy it than someone who is pushed. We might still do it, but we may not feel the love for it. But anyway, something to sit with. I'm just going to pause here for a moment to share something with you. If you'd like to keep up to date with what I'm working on in the world of midlife and burnout, I invite you to join my mailing list. It's where I share updates on the resources, events, and services I offer to help you navigate midlife stress, overwhelm, and burnout with more ease and clarity. As a thank you, you'll receive my free guided journal, Journaling as a Way Back to Yourself, a gentle, at your own pace, reflective practice to slow down, listen inward, and reconnect with what matters most. You'll also get a couple of extra resources to support you in your inbox after your journal arrives. You can sign up via the link in the show notes or at shannonaswales.com/subscribe. So now back to the episode. So how do we actually practice compassion in the real world? I like to start people off, and I'm going to share with you here, is a bit of a framework. I find frameworks help me and help some of the people that I work with to kind of just have a conceptualization in the mind of how to practice this. So I get this framework from Kristin Neff, who I mentioned earlier, but it was the wrong reference. Kristin Neff is very big in the self-compassionate world. She is a psychologist and researcher, and her life's work and her ongoing work is in self-compassion. Actually, on my bookshelf over there, I've got two of her books, and actually a new one too, but one she wrote recently with Christopher Germer on self-compassion for burnout, which I can highly recommend. But early on in my career, when I first discovered self-compassion, I bought her book, just Self-Compassion, I think it's called, if I remember rightly. But any of her work, and her latest that I bought but I haven't read yet, is Fierce Compassion. But Kristin Neff has her own website and lots of wealth of practices that she offers for free, both meditation, but also non-meditation ways to build self-compassion as well. So depending on what you like. But this is her framework, which I think is a lovely way to start. So her framework of self-compassion is one, mindfulness. So to build this U-turn caregiving inwards, this compassionate relationship with self, we need to build the skill, the way of mindfulness. Mindfulness is being present on purpose and without judgment, and instead a gentle curiosity. So to be aware that we're suffering, we need to notice that suffering, and we need to drop any judgment of that. Judgment will happen, but we need not to pay attention to that and to bring curiosity. So mindfulness is a really important first step and a skill well, I think it's a skill and a way of being that needs to be cultivated and is part of this compassionate relationship for self. But quite simply, it might look like, mindfulness might look like, oh, here's a moment of suffering. Here's anxiety or here's sadness. So we're noticing and often naming what we're experiencing, that suffering, or here's me, my mind, busy mind going off, I find that one. And that can be quite, painful as well. So we notice and name that suffering. That's a very simple mindful technique. Then, second in this framework is what Kristen Neff calls common humanity. But what she means by this is, and this is a really important step because a lot of us don't have this, it's noticing that what you're experiencing is normal and valid, and that every human being experiences suffering. Because often what our minds do when it gets judgy, blamey, is that it can basically make us feel like we're alone and that there's something wrong with me or wrong with others, or that might, we start to invalidate our suffering. So this is a really important step to normalize, validate that as a human being in this world, that we all experience suffering. So that part is really important. And the third part is the kindness, is that support action. And this can look like a lot of things. And already what you're doing is already along the lines of kindness. You're noticing and naming that suffering. You're recognizing that this is something we all have in common. So none of us are separated in this way. And I know everyone's suffering is different, but that's when we can get into that bit of heated debate, and we can start to neglect or invalidate. So this is just about validating and recognizing without pulling it apart. Your suffering matters and it needs your attention. It needs you to notice and name. But then the kindness action. So you're already being kind by doing those first two steps. But the kindness, the third and final part of the framework, is the action of kindness that we do something to alleviate or at least soothe us during that suffering. So it might be asking ourselves, what do I need right now? Or it might be, yeah, like what do I need right now? And even if we don't have an answer, it could be that, hey, I'm going to sit here for a while. I'm just going to be with you. So it could be saying that to yourself, because remember, the voice matters. Like, I'm here for you. I'm not going away. Whatever you need, let me know. I'm here. It might be turning to something you like doing. It might be putting a piece of music on. It might be making yourself your favorite cup of tea. Might be, I know for a lot of my clients, water is a very soothing activity. So it might be putting on some sounds of water or having a bath or going into the shower or going down to a local creek or riverway or ocean if you're near one. But yeah, whatever it might be that is soothing, supportive, and in some ways alleviating. I should caveat here, it's not about fixing. It's never about fixing. When we focus on fixing, we focus on output, which we don't have direct control over often. It's just about taking that mindful, common humanity and kindness action. And then often the output will be what it'll be. When we focus on the steps and the actions, in the moment, and we really infuse and engage in it, we'll get what we get. And often it's pretty good. But when we focus on something that we have to be like, I've got to be not sad or not angry, or I've got to feel calm, or that's when we can get a bit messed up. Self-compassion is meeting ourselves in the moment. Again, just like we do for others, we don't expect them, hopefully, to, cheer up, or but we simply be with them as well. And that's the trickiest thing. That's the hardest thing, both with compassion out and compassion in. It is hard to be with the suffering. And that's why those support actions are so important. It does help. We all need to be tended to. So let's just put this into a nice little neat kind of package you can go away and try in case you need a bit of that direction. So next time that you notice some suffering, it could be just something simple. And always start on the simple things too, rather than the big things. That can be hard. So it could be just waking up from your sleep in a bit of a, well, some of you would be in exhausted state, but it might even be at the start of the day, feeling that tiredness. And when you wake and you notice that saying to yourself, this is a moment of suffering, this is hard. Or if you can get specific, be specific, but this is a moment of suffering, this is hard. Then you can say, I'm not alone. Part of this human condition is to find things hard at times. So you can go, I'm not alone. Other people feel it too. And can I just say the rates of burnout in midlife are really high. So you're definitely not alone in that. And then finally, what do I need to feel supported right now? And if you don't have an answer, just get up, take things slowly, or maybe sit in the bed for a little bit longer. Maybe just go at a slower pace in your morning if you can, even if it's for a few minutes. Just go gently. What is something gentle I can do for myself right now? Or if you do know, then give yourself what you need. I always like starting the day with a cup of coffee, and going and sit out on my porch. It just depends on how much time I have to how much time I spend out there. But the cup of coffee, the warm liquid, and being able to see, I get up pretty early. So seeing that break of the dawn, is really beautiful. So again, it's not about fixing or forcing things, just taking that supportive action and seeing what lands. Now, if this has been really, you're like loving this, loving hearing about compassion and want to deep dive more into it, I've mentioned a couple of really good resources already today, but I also want to let you know, basically how I practice is in bringing mindful self-compassion, compassion-focused therapy, helping women in their midlife develop this relationship with themselves if they haven't already. So the community I run, the Midlife Reclaimed community, which is offshoot from this podcast for people who want to deep dive more, that's where you will find a lot more activities and practices and meditations, and other midlife women doing the same. So I highly recommend to check that out. The link is in my show notes. But if you Google Midlife Reclaimed Community, Shannon Swales, you will find it. It's under the Mighty Networks. So it's where I can put all my stuff in. And you also get early releases of the podcasts. And also you get a chance to interact with me. So there's some bonuses there. If you're wanting to learn more about this, really wanting to work on this, I highly recommend that. Yeah, and it's free for the first 7 days, so you can try it out. And if it's not for you, that's okay. Mhm. And I just want to leave you with today that this U-turn in caregiving in this self-compassion, developing this nurturing, loving relationship with yourself. It's not about fixing you. It's not about making you a better person. It's not about making you stronger or resilient, although it will assist with that. It's really about giving you what you've always needed. In some ways, there's a Tara Brach, a psychologist, I believe a psychologist, meditation teacher and Buddhist. She talks about compassion, self-love. She uses self-love rather than self-compassion, is often about reparenting, giving what we've always needed, uh, but, from ourselves. And from there we can flourish. So it's not selfish, it's not weak, it's not something we need to fix ourselves to improve ourselves. It's life's necessity. And it wasn't your fault that you didn't receive and have this relationship nurtured uh, in your early life. However, as adults, it is our responsibility when we know better and if we feel this is the right way for us to venture down that. But it's a necessity. My own experience, I never had a compassionate relationship for myself. I had a really harsh, horrible, negative, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. Horrible. I had that first teacher. And it destroyed me in a lot of ways. It was a big factor in a lot of my mental health downturns and in life, and I've had a few, and particularly the one in my early midlife. And compassion has been key, but particularly learning how to really deeply, deeply show up for myself. Uh, and it's a savior. I know that sounds a bit corny or weird, but I don't know where I would be if I didn't have it. So I'm a really big believer, as you could probably tell from personal experience, but also seeing how it served others. And I've also noticed all the time I've been in the mental health industry, people who have at least somewhat of a compassionate relationship with themselves are often, it doesn't mean that they don't have tough times and challenges, but their mental health and well-being are often a lot more buoyant. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox. I feel like I'm convincing, but I just truly, truly believe in it. The science lets us know, but I just lived experience know. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for engaging. Love to hear what you thought about this episode. Feel free to comment, like if you can, review. It helps get this out. Share to friends or family or people you feel would benefit. I just want these messages to go out there for people to sit with and see if it's something that they want to try on. They feel like it would be helpful. But yeah, take care of you and bye for now. Thanks for listening to Midlife Reclaimed. I hope today's conversation has reminded you that you are not alone and that change is possible even in the busiest seasons of life. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, or review the podcast and share it with another midlife woman who might need it. For more resources on navigating midlife stress, overwhelm, and burnout, along with reflective writing prompts and community connection, visit shannonaswales.com. You can also watch full episodes on YouTube at Midlife Reclaimed. Remember, you have permission to slow down, to rest, and to reclaim what matters most. See you again soon.